What can you do to attract hundreds of migratory birds to a place where none would venture? Not just birds, even butterflies, dragonflies, insects, and humans. Quite a difficult proposition, you might say. Well, think again. By sheer imagination, application of basic environmental technology, and tremendous hard work, one single person has managed to do it all, and that too in the cacophony of the national capital. Hello and welcome to the Times of India Gold podcast. I'm Sonalika Sinha. In Green Crusaders today, we have with us Tarun Sebastian. Tarun, born to an Indian father and Dutch mother, is an environmental engineer. He successfully transformed the 15-acre Hauz Khas lake in the heart of Delhi from a stinking water body to a paradise.
There's a nice breeze, there's no smell. The lake, it almost looked blue this summer. There's huge plants that are 7 feet, 8 feet tall. The migratory birds are attracted to the wetlands. They actually use the floating wetlands as nesting sites. So it's like a whole radical transformation with an entirely new ecosystem.
It wasn't too long ago when the Hauz Khas lake was a putrid, rotting-smelling water body that looked more like a sewer. It was choked with filth and rubble. In 2003, DDA and Intac tried to revive the dying lake. Every day, about 2.5 million litres of treated water was diverted from Kishangarh sewage treatment plant in Basant Kunj at an expense of Rs 50 lakh through a 3.5 kilometre long pipeline. The program was an initial success, but the lake became dirty again. Tarun says most likely the water coming from the sewage treatment plant was untreated. Several rounds of the DDA office yielded no result. So Tarun came up with an innovative idea. He would ask morning walkers, passers-by, their family members, friends, and even children moving around the lake to lend him a hand in building wetlands inside the lake. Children of the park employees also joined in. Soon Tarun had hundreds working with him. Together they built two kinds of wetlands, constructed wetlands and floating wetlands. But what really is a wetland? Just as forests are called lungs of the earth, wetlands are known as its kidneys. They regulate water and filter waste from the landscape. They trap sediments and remove pollutants, which helps to purify the water. Biodiversity is high around wetlands as they support a host of animals and plant life. Let's hear Tarun explain it.
It's an established technology, especially in the rest of the world, and it's all to do with the direction of the water flow. But essentially, it's a filter media which you pass the water through. And along this filter media, you get a film of bacteria that break down pollutants. And there's also physical processes that trap the pollutants. And on top, you have the plants, which is what you see from the surface. It just looks like a landscaping feature, and all the water flows under the surface. So there's also no odor problem.
Tarun, you constructed wetlands as well as built the floating ones. Can you tell us something about these?
So we used the existing drain they had and just converted it to a wetland and tried to maximize the treatment that we could do in there. And that was also one of the reasons we sort of selected Hauz Khas Lake, because they had these channels that were already there. They were full of sewage and just dirty and stinking. So we thought, it would be a smaller budget for us to work with that we might be able to raise the funds with. We used a lot of recycled materials at the beginning. We used old bricks. And just had volunteers doing all the cleaning and doing the work. And actually, people quite enjoyed it. We had an Adopt an Island scheme where people could come and adopt these floating islands, floating wetlands, and they used to make it themselves. So we had lots of citizen groups come for that. We had Twitter, we had Pathway School, New Delhi Rising. This gave people an opportunity to learn how they can make the floating wetlands themselves. It also gave them an opportunity to put it into the lake and, see for themselves how their contribution is helping to clean up the lake. And I believe this was the first time in India that a sewage drain has been converted into a wetland that treats the water.
What were the changes that you saw in the lake?
There's a nice breeze. There's no smell. The lake, it almost looked blue this summer. There's huge plants that are 7 feet, 8 feet tall. There's birds, there's dragonflies, there's all kinds of insects. The migratory birds are attracted to the wetlands. They actually use the floating wetlands as nesting sites. So we find eggs. You can see the birds nesting on the islands. So it's like a whole radical transformation with an entirely new ecosystem.
The Delhi government has adopted Tarun's model in its City of Lakes project. At the Hauz Khas lake, Tarun has taken his model a step further. Here, lake water is pumped into the filterate and then put back. It basically acts like a swimming pool filter.
So we made a second wetland like that, which was designed just to filter the lake water. So we actually pump the water from the lake, pass it through a wetland, and then put it back into the lake. And I think it's the only lake in India to have a filter like this, because it's one thing just to filter the incoming water, but you also need some sort of water filtration to keep the lake clean. Then we also made a floating aerator. It was the first time in Delhi that a floating aerator had been used. And specifically, it's a subsurface aerator, so it actually pumps oxygen into the depths of the lake, which is a much more efficient way of oxygenating the lake, as opposed to the fountains that are traditionally used by the authorities. And then within 6 months of the inlet filter being built, all the smell was gone from the lake. It took about 2 years. After 2 years, we did some more water sampling, and there was a massive reduction in nitrates, phosphates, and there used to be very big algae blooms that happen in the lake, and they don't really happen anymore.
So basically, these wetlands do the work of a sewage treatment plant. Can you tell us how these plants in the wetlands manage to survive the pollution?
Natural wetlands is generally where a lot of organic matter accumulates. So those plants have evolved to tolerate high organic loading, and they can also tolerate having their roots completely submerged in water. So the wetlands, when you use them for sewage treatment, you use the plants take up the nitrates and the phosphates, and phosphates and nitrates are what cause algae. Normally, it's very hard to remove phosphates from sewage. So that's one of the advantages of wetlands, is that they can remove phosphates and nitrates on a continuous basis because that's a natural fertilizer for the plants. So when you see the plants growing, they're taking up all these nutrients that would normally cause algae. Now you're using them to create the biomass with the plants.
Installing artificial wetlands is a big win for Hauz Khas Lake. It requires zero electricity. It is cost effective and no chemical is added to the water to treat it. A sewage treatment machine requires daily operations with qualified staff. But once a wetland starts working, it flows under gravity and does not need much intervention. Tarun says it costs less than Rs 10,000 a year in maintenance. He met DDA officials and gave them a proposal. He would raise the funds and do all the work. All that he wanted was their permission. After much ado, DDA agreed. Well, why wouldn't it? Lakes this size have budgets running into crores of rupees. Tarun managed to raise Rs 20 lakhs.
We started with just volunteers and donations. And once you start showing results, then more people get interested. That's how we were lucky to get that CSR funding. Once they came on board, we managed to finish the work all within like 4 or 5 months. The hardest part was raising the funding. That took us at least a year.
Why was it so important for Tarun to take up the huge task of cleaning up an entire lake? Was it because of its history? That it was built in the 13th century by Alauddin Khilji, the ruler of Delhi? That it fulfilled the water needs to people living nearby? Or was it because the Hauz Khas lake had stopped attracting people despite its beauty? Whatever the reason, Tarun has for sure proved that a constructive combination of nature, technology and engineering can do wonders. That's all for now. Do wait for our next episode of Green Crusaders and keep listening to the Times of India Gold podcast.